Hello, everyone, and welcome to Coffee with Convery, where we dive into inspiring stories, uncovering life-changing strategies, and explore how individuals define and achieve their own success. Today, I'm pumped to introduce someone who truly lives and breathes entrepreneurship, leadership, and growth, and that's Max Notis. Max is the founder and president of CoMission, a company he built to transform how sales teams perform and how they grow. With years of experience in sales leadership, Max has coached high-performing teams, written winning playbooks, and now helps companies unlock sustainable revenue with scalable strategies. Max knows what it takes to close deals, but most importantly, he knows how to build people up and how cultures thrive. So whether you're a student just starting out, someone in their big first job, or you're been thinking about maybe making a bold move in your career, Max Journey has gems for you to think about and to listen to. Max, welcome to the podcast.
Brian, it is so good to be here.
It's so cool because just a few years ago it was a flipped around. I was on
That's
your
how we
podcast.
met. That's
That's
how we
right.
met.
That is how we met. That was exciting. Um, and look, and we've stayed in touch all this time, which is awesome. So thanks again for being on it. I wanted to maybe start with some cool, you know, rapid fire questions just to get us going. So if you had to think about it, what is your superpower?
My superpower would be camaraderie.
Camaraderie. I love that. What was your favorite subject in school?
History.
History. All right. Okay. And we all start somewhere. What was your very first job?
Babysitting.
Babysitting. Okay.
Babysitting. Yup.
Okay. What's just coming in handy now?
Which is definitely coming in handy. But what's nice is I get to pick the snacks at the baby's house and I can go to bed, I guess, whenever that's no difference. I'm not really allowed to go to bed in either one.
That's true now that you have a young one around, right?
Yup.
Keeps you
Yup.
going. If you had to describe yourself in one word, what would you choose?
Determination.
Determination. I would agree.
I
All
did
right.
some preparation on these questions, by the way.
That's okay. That's
Yeah,
okay. So
absolutely.
let's rewind a bit. A lot of folks on this podcast are really interesting around where people's journeys begin and how they kind of got to where they are. So, maybe like what led you into the world of sales? Was it something that you had a knack for? Or did you just fall into it? Or, so kind of take us back a bit and where it all started.
Good question. I forever, even maybe even still had no idea what I wanted to do when I grew up. I knew I wanted to make money. That was one thing. I was always financially motivated. And in high school and middle school even, I took every job under the sun. I kept score for the little leagues and did announcing, and I was a Sunday school teacher and a camp counselor. I was a bus driver. I was a pizza guy. Every little thing. And then when I got to college, I think I became a history major because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I loved history. It was my favorite class in high
Mhm.
school, but I think it kind of felt more open-ended, where I could be a lawyer or in this or in that. You could just kind of parlay it into a bunch of things. And as a result, in school, I took every internship possible. Like from before my freshman year started, I had internships to the point where when I graduated, I couldn't even fit them all on my resume. And I'm thinking I could have had so much more fun that summer. Like, what a shame. But I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I was very ambitious. And so as time went on, I kind of found the media world. It was more fun. It was a little more poppy. They had like parties and it just felt a little more spirited than other industries.
Exciting. Yeah.
And then as I graduated, I still didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I met a tech company and they said, we have a couple of roles available. What are you thinking? And I said to them, I want to be in control of my destiny. I want to know that if I work harder, I can earn, that it'll translate. And they said, you should consider sales. And I had no idea what that meant, but I said, all right, let's do it. And I'm thinking sales in New York City, this will be like Mad Men, and I'll be wearing suits and we'll be getting drinks at 10 in the morning. And like, nope, it was rock'em sock'em phone sales at a tech company that was fortunately very promising and I was able to grow through.
Nice.
And I learned a lot about, what I was capable of, what I was good at, what I didn't like, what I liked. And that ended up kind of propelling my career from there.
Interesting. Yeah. It's amazing how all those, and it's nice to hear that you had so many experiences in those internships that, sometimes people ask me, should I do an internship? I'm like, yes, absolutely. You figure out what you like, what you
Absolutely.
don't like, right? So
It also
that's,
gets rid of like a little bit of those like deer in the headlights. Like going
yeah,
into an office for the first time, it's intimidating. Anytime
yeah,
you go into a new office, even if it's a new job, is intimidating. You see the way that like the halls are like polished and lit and the people are all dressed up and they're talking to each other and have a rapport that you don't have with them. You feel like an outsider.
yeah,
But like, going those internships, if anything, it made it so when I walked into an office the first time, I don't know, I just felt like I'd been there a little bit, which
yeah.
that little bit in a new environment goes a whole long way.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's talk about CoMission. I know you've worked with startups and helped lead acquisitions, and now you've launched your own company. What was the turning point for you, and when did you know it was time to build something of your own?
Well, so it all started really with that first sales job. I had to I had to make 40 sales in 40 days or I was fired. And that's how their training program went. It was terrifying. It was so much pressure. I mean, I just graduated school and I'm turning to my folks and everyone be like, "Yeah, I got a job in New York." And it's like, "Oh my God, I could lose that job in 5 minutes." And my manager's first day was my first day, which is fine. But the problem was he never would say when he didn't know the answer to something, which really left me very alone.
Right.
How do I handle this situation? And you knew he was just BSing you on the answer. And you'd leave the meeting like, what do I do? Like, that's
Yeah.
so unhelpful. And I made it through. I was a good seller. And then I was promoted to run that farm system training program where every month I'm bringing in 4 to 12 new hires and I'm running them through onboarding. I'm interviewing them. I'm running through onboarding and then I'm coaching them and either firing them or promoting them. And I trained hundreds of salespeople and I saw what a difference it made being able to provide that coaching. I very much wanted to be the change in the world I wanted to see. I wanted to provide what I wished I had. And when I joined that program, it was like a 25% retention rate of salespeople, like bloody chopping board.
Right.
And within my first few months, the percentage went up to 75% retention. And they even had me pull it back a little bit. So I always saw what a difference. You could see when you're working with a seller the light in their eyes when you're resonating with them and helping them, and you see a whole career move forward. And really, post pandemic, I just noticed a trend with every startup that I worked with where they all had the same problem, where they would bring on maybe they got funding and
Yeah.
they'd bring on a fleet of 6 salespeople and they say, here's your onboarding. You're going to meet the department head of every department in this
Hmm.
company. And now, all right, go do it. And you're like, what do I do? And then 3 months in, they're like, well, you're still new. But then 4 months in, they're like, well, you need to be you're not new anymore. And you don't feel comfortable in the pitch. You don't understand what's going on. They've told you to read here's the script and here's the pitch you're going to do. And make sure you ask a ton of discovery questions. So you're following what they say because you don't know. You're like, it's like any port in a storm. It's the
Yeah.
point where you forget how to sell. You forget like what you're actually doing, like why you were brought there. Follow the methodology. Well, these things get very formulaic. And I realized that this was a massive problem across really every startup that I'd seen, even larger companies. They forgot how to coach their people. They forgot that it
Mm.
was important to. And then with these 6 new hires, a few months in, they're cutting 4 of them. And wow, like what a wildly expensive project this was. What a gut-wrenching this project, was for the company. And then how callous this was to these salespeople that really took a leap of faith coming with you. And my feeling was, well, you have these companies that are starving for revenue, as
Hmm.
buyers right now in the economy are tightening their belt. Companies are so money thirsty.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you have sellers that are really money motivated. We were talking about Gen Z, and they get this knock for being like this socialist generation. Every study I've seen, they're more money motivated than any generation in the workforce. They've seen their parents get laid off and furloughed,
Yeah.
and so you have this workforce that's motivated to earn and they're talented and they're hungry, and then you have companies that are starving for revenue, and it's like what a great scenario, but there's a gap. There's a really big missing piece there, and it's they're not training them. They're not putting in that time. And maybe it's when you went to COVID after COVID, you just did everything virtually. Maybe you forgot those steps. Maybe you're trying to cheap out and save costs and say, we'll bring on people who can quote unquote do this, just walk in and do it. But
Yeah.
it's a new company, it's a new product. Like there's no, you can either make that an easy gap and make it so they're appreciative that you took the time to get them on board and now they're producing for you, or you're rolling the dice if they're going to figure it out or not, and it had nothing to do with their talent level. So I saw that this was a problem everywhere. It was a problem that I've solved before and love to solve. And so, like we said before, jumping in your own thing is scary. I talked a lot to my wife, to my folks, to my friends, and the consensus was this is a really good idea. And at this point in my life, you know what? If you're going to shoot your shot, shoot it now. And so far, it's going really well. We're making a big impact. And I will never, I'm saying this on the air, I will never have another job.
Good for you, my friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, and congrats. And why do you think the model you've created, which, you've lived, you've experienced, and that's why you've brought this forward, why it resonates so well when they actually try what you're telling them to do?
Because they're not getting it anywhere else. They're when you bring on a CRO, for example, the CRO's primary job is to close big deals. Their secondary job is to run the team, or that's how it naturally falls.
Yeah,
And building a team is a whole different thing than running a team. We can see the numbers report. I'll have a one I'll give you an example. I was working with a CRO and I say I'm new to the industry. They say that's not going to be a problem. And lo and behold, it was a big problem. And now I'm meeting with the CRO once a week for my one-on-one, who is telling me every week how swamped he is. I'm not going in and saying I don't understand the industry. It's a big ask.
yeah,
That's really intimidating. And then who does this responsibility fall to is a really unfortunate situation. So, and the truth is also not to just damn a CRO, but coaching people takes time.
yeah,
If I'm listening to a call for a rep and it's an hour long call, it'll take me 2.5 hours to listen to it because I'm taking notes throughout and I'm putting together an overall thoughts and I'm pausing it throughout. And it does take time. So I get where the problem's created, but it's a problem nonetheless. And
yeah,
that's where CoMission comes in. And a lot of why we're effective is I've been there before. I've done it. The whole name of CoMission is I'm in it with both of you. If you do right
right.
by the sellers, they're going to deliver for the company. I don't have an allegiance to one side or the other. And by doing right by both, they both benefit massively. So it's not altruism, but there's there's a there's a sympathy, there's an empathy there
Yeah,
that we can work off of, and then there's an absolute result. I always say it's like there's a selfish symbiosis to what we're doing. Like when I meet with a sales rep, anytime I've been leading sales reps, I've always said, here's the deal, our relationship, I don't do well unless you do well. Like
yeah,
everything I'm doing is selfishly in your best interest. And in that regard, then we have a picture perfect business relationship. You can trust what I'm saying because I don't have an ulterior motive. I'm trying to get my paycheck, and the only way I can do that is by improving your career.
yeah. Pretty basic, pretty straightforward, but again, people don't think about it. So it's good that you're in the room sharing your insights and thoughts because that's where the rubber will hit the road and things will start to happen. So
Totally.
talking about success, part of this podcast that I talk about with the guests and I know the listeners, I feel there's a lot of things out there that try to predetermine what success is for you or how you should define your own success. But I think really, or how people should define it for you. But I really think what's most importantly is that you define your own success. Now, you seen it from inside of major companies and now as an entrepreneur. How do you define success for yourself today? And how
So
has that evolved? Yeah,
it's a great question because I think evolved is a major component to it.
yeah,
You know, Again, like I said, my whole life I was very motivated and I wanted to succeed. I grew up in a really well-to-do area, and maybe it was an insecurity. I felt like if I didn't financially do well, then I'm a loser.
yeah,
Then I'm not. So a lot of my early career decisions were really based on that. Even going into sales, if I work harder, I'll make more money. Than hell, I'll work harder than anyone because I want to make more money. And I think there's something good about that, but there's also a lot of short-sighted about that. I thought that success in life was very much kind of just this predetermined make money, get married, have a baby, buy the house. And those are all great things. Like I don't want to minimize those, but as I've grown and gotten older and been through quite a lot, um, it's become a more multidimensional definition of success because it's not just so binary. I'll give you an example. I was working with a business owner, and he very much said to me, "Well, I want to run a big company." And I said, "Okay." And he goes, "Well, isn't that what success is?" And I thought it was interesting because, okay, like on paper, but you could also run a big company that isn't doing well. You could run
Right.
a big company and everyone's miserable. It's very black or white. And he says, "Well, what's your definition of success?" And I hadn't really thought about what that was, but I know, like, I could point to immediately how one of the things I consider a success is I get to pick my daughter up from school every day. She ends school at 4:30, and I am there every single day, barring like obviously circumstance, surprise circumstances.
Right.
But I get to pick my daughter up every day, and that autonomy is such a different side of the success equation that has nothing to do with the finance. They could connect, but it's completely different. So being able to almost like just be happier, which
Yeah.
sounds so flighty, but the way that I work is I work like a lunatic from 9 until 3. No one, I would put any amount of money on it. Nobody's getting more done between 9 and 3 than I am.
I
It's
know.
a
I
mental
bet.
illness. It just is. I wish I weren't this way,
Yeah.
but I do. And then with that, I get to on a Friday, by the time Friday comes, I'm so beat. And I know I've already done more than anybody else. I don't have to go to that stupid stand-up meeting and just fake being so into it and energetic at 4 o'clock on a Friday when I'm really thinking, I don't want to be here. Like,
Yeah.
I love everyone I work with. I do like being with you folks, but right now I'm kicked. I'm caked.
Yeah.
So, so I think, you know, to give you another interesting take, and I read about it, and we're always looking for the ideal. Like before you get into college, you're thinking, God, if I just got into college, I'd be the king. And then you get into college, and then they say, here are finals, and you're like, oh my God, I have to get an A. If I get an A, then I'm
Yeah.
the king. And then it's time to get a job. Oh, I don't have a job, I'm a loser. When I get a job, I'm the king. And if your goal is the horizon, you're never going to hit it.
It's good
So
advice. Yeah.
it's if you're on a boat, and I'm stealing this from a book that I read, but if you're looking at the shore, you can see, wow, I've really come far. And if I think your definition of success probably should be continuously changing, you should hold yourself really accountable to it. But if your definition of success is the same as it was when you were 5 years old, that's kind of stupid, no? Like,
Yeah.
so I think it was always, kind of binary and maybe even told this is what success is, Max. Whereas as you get older, as I've gotten older and been able to really own my own life more and been through things and
Yeah.
realized this is what makes me happy compared to other people, those successes are different. I get to play
Yeah.
hockey,
Yeah.
in my adult life. How cool is that? I never thought that I could do that.
Yeah.
My dad never played hockey or any sport when I was growing up. So like, wow, I get to do that and I get to play music. Like these are so many things that make me successful in my life.
Do you think
I don't
you
know, it
had
takes a little
to,
pressure off.
no, 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 it's really a cool response. That's what I want to ask you. How did you, because I agree, like too much, and I hear this all the time from different people, is there's this predetermination of what success is. And that's why I like this question and talking about this more is, and when you go by those, happiness isn't always there. You're just like going through the motions of what everyone's supposed to do, get married, have a kid,
Hmm.
buy a house, whatever, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Um, how do you, like, for someone who's in that position, because there's a lot of young people listening to this podcast, and I know I've heard them say, well, my parents said I should be a lawyer, and my dad said I should do this. And I,
Yeah.
I always say, but is it what you want to do? And they're like, no, but I don't know how to tell them. And I think there's always that's a big influence sometimes on what success is because they had lived something different. But how did
Totally.
you open yourself up to get to that? I know it's experience and age, because I know I've gone through it too, where all of a sudden I was like, oh, this is how I define my own success.
Yeah.
But how do you think through that to get to that point where you allow yourself to be open about it? Because I think you shared a lot of really good examples, and I'm trying to think of how we can help people listening to say, like, I don't know, take a break. Uh,
Yeah.
think about what you like, make a list. I don't know, whatever. Has any of that worked for you?
Yeah, so I'll start off by saying one of the things that was really big for me was it was separating from my parents. And
Yeah.
let me explain what I mean by that. Is
Yeah.
not I moved halfway around the world and I don't talk to them. I still see them all the time. But separating them meaning a lot of times you grow up and your parents have let's say like they take one side of the political spectrum and you don't know politics well. So you just kind of echo what they say to seem like you know a little bit of what you're
Yeah.
talking about, but you don't want to get too much into it. Well, at some point you're going to start seeing things that you may agree with them and you may disagree with them and learning to accept where you are different from them
Mm,
and where, the life that they lived is the life they chose. Like you're not offending them by being you, or maybe you are, but you have a right to be.
yeah.
And your life is so uniquely yours that I think sometimes we get lost in, you grow up in a web maybe of friends and family and this and that, that this is the current you're on, and you don't realize that any other part of the ocean operates differently from it. And when you can pick your
Yeah.
head up a little bit, you can say like, I had some really tough stuff happen, and I got to look in the mirror and say like, am I happy with what's going on? How the hell did I get here? Whoa, 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 whoa. And then pull myself out of the current a little bit.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that required really having a hard conversation or even series of conversations. My folks of saying, listen, when you guys want to come over or meet me in the city, I'm allowed to say no. There are times where I just want to lay on my couch and watch TV. I need to like recover from the week.
Yeah.
I can't be keeping you folks up and up and up. I've got my whole self to keep up.
Good
So I
points.
think that was something that you kind of run into. And truth be told, I go to therapy. I've been in
Yeah.
therapy for 10 years. I go every week, and I am a huge proponent of therapy,
Yeah.
huge proponent. And
Yeah.
what that helped with, because therapy is all about you. And what's nice is you can learn to be selfish. And what I don't mean by selfish, I don't mean you get all the cookies and nobody gets any others. What I mean is if you need a day to rest and your parents are saying, why don't you come back out to the house? We're barbecuing. Take the rest.
Yeah.
That's okay. You're
Yeah.
you're your own person and you got to take care of yourself. And I think through a lot of that self-acknowledgement and self-validation, you're going to come up with your own definition of success. And then instead of hitting things like these are checkbox items I have to do or I'm a loser, you're you're kind of you're happier to be doing things. Like sometimes
100%.
when you make a sale, there's just a relief of, oh my God, I hit my quota, as opposed to, yes, now I'm making an extra however much.
Yeah.
And I think that when you get to own your definitions of successes and happiness, and again, they should change and you should hold yourself really accountable to them. You get to make your life what you want it to be. You get to be the architect. So as far
Absolutely.
as we know, we've only got one. So,
That's right.
take it, run it, and
Thank you
um,
for going
don't
deeper
be
into that.
apologetic about it.
Yeah. Thanks for going deeper and thanks for sharing your own experiences because I think reflection's a big part of that, but also saying no and being okay to say no to different situations so you have
Yeah,
time for yourself because otherwise it's tough, especially if you're a people pleaser. You can tend to not think about yourself. But thank you for
totally.
sharing that. I think the other
Oh, yeah.
thing I wanted to tap into is lots of entrepreneurs, lots of people thinking about it, lots of people who I know, young people building companies in their basement with AI.
Yeah.
Uh, Different people kind of looking at entrepreneurial, like later in career as a pivot. Can you give us like a peek maybe into your day of like what that's like as an entrepreneur running your own business? What kind of
Yeah.
motivates you, keeps you focused?
Well, I'll give you, I mean, I think it even ties a lot into what we just talked about, a
Yeah,
definition of success. So, I started this business, and when you start a business, you're not going to earn for a little while. Like you're just not. And that was a really hard thing, still is for me to be okay with, where fortunately I have a wife who says, you know what? I believe in this. I believe in you. We're going to have to spend a little less for the early days but I can cover us. And maybe if you're younger in your career, you can live off ramen. Like you make your cuts wherever you can.
that's right.
Um, but I had a hard time accepting, am I going to not be earning what I was as I jumped into this? And so with that, that is a big motivator, is quite honestly my own insecurity. Is it keeps me pushing because I want more. I want more clients and bigger clients, and I want to service them. And I don't want anyone to think, have a bad or negative experience with my company. Like that's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of
Yep.
anxiety. So, with that and coupled with the definition of success is every day I wake up or my daughter wakes me up. I get showered. I then take, and then after the shower, I sit and I meditate for 10 minutes. I do a 10-minute guided meditation because I notice when I take my dog and my daughter for a morning walk, we live on the water, that's when the work stuff starts to creep in. I can't pay attention to my daughter because I'm
Hmm.
starting to think about the day ahead. So every morning I wake up, I meditate for 10 minutes just to breathe, just to give myself a little space. I take her to school. And then I come back and I'll have breakfast, lunch, and I work from 9 to 3:30 every day. And what is the day there looking like? It's working with salespeople, it's meeting with new companies, and it's building my own company, whether this be assets for the company, marketing, anything that needs being done. And there's a never-ending list of stuff to do. And then at 3:30, I hit the brakes and I go to the gym. For anywhere from a half hour to an hour, I go to the gym or I go for a run. And after that run or go to the gym, I meditate for another 10 minutes. This is every day like
Wow.
clockwork because then it's time to pick up my daughter. And if I don't separate work from her, when I pick her up, I'm thinking about work and I get annoyed at work for distracting me from my daughter and I get annoyed at my daughter for distracting me from work. And there's almost like I see where my folks were growing up and they had a commute. I see where that's actually a really healthy thing. They had alone time. They had a separation between the two.
But no
And
cell
so
phones either, by the way.
no cell phones. They just had like Howard Stern.
Drive. Yeah.
Yeah. So I meditate, I pick her up, and then from 4:30 till she goes to bed at 7, it's her time, and then it's time for my wife and I to just put our feet up. And if I've got hockey, hell yeah, I'm going to hockey. And if not, maybe I have to do a little work, but most of the time we're just chilling, and that's every day like clockwork.
Nice. Yeah. Thank you. Give some insights into how that can work. And I really love that meditation is such a big part of your day. I think that's super
Yeah,
important.
I'll tell you, I used to think if I didn't end the day with like I used to call it finals brain. Like when you're in college, you have finals and
Yeah.
you study all day and you leave and your head is like throbbing. And someone will be like, Max, I want to tell you a funny story. And you're like, you don't get it. What you're saying is literally bouncing off of my brain. Like I can't absorb it. And I used to think if I don't end every day, like just this insane anxiety, this accountability of if I don't end every day caked, then I didn't do enough. And wait a minute, dude, that is insane. That is completely insane. Do what you need. I sometimes I like this expression. You can't do more than you can do. You can't
Yeah.
do more. You can't do more in a day than you can do in a day. So do what you can do, and that's it. Like that's it.
Yeah.
And I think then that gives you a lot of, I don't know, you're not going to burn yourself out. You get a lot more longevity in your career than crash, burn, and nothing is satisfying.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about pivots and bold moves. Both of us have gone off on our own, and we've talked about that privately as well as how exciting it is and how much work it is too, right? As far as doing that. But what would you tell someone who might be listening to this podcast who feels stuck at where they are, whether at work, let's say at work, and they're stuck and they're just not digging it. They're dreaming of a big change. What should they do? What should they think?
Well, I think you want to like it's a tough one because it's a little vague, but let's say you're in a job you're not thrilled. Do some real soul searching. What is it that you aren't happy about? Because sometimes, for example, you could have a bad boss and it'll make you think I hate this whole industry. That's not really that. It's like a pressure point, and when you press on it, everything hurts. So I think you need to do some soul searching on what's bothering you. You know, what's bothering you and what are you looking for? And then the step two is, can I get this at where I am? Because, the longer you stay somewhere, you're building an equity, whether it be a social equity, whether it be equity, whether, it's just a consistency. There's something to that. And if you can get it there and you can make it known and grow, you might be looking at a promotion. And if your team's willing to work with you on, hey, if you do X, Y, and Z, then we'll do A, B, C for you. That's a really good deal. And then, there's something to that, to patience. There's something, especially even earlier in your career, it's unfortunate, but you got to eat some shit. Like you
Yeah,
do. And I'm not sure if this is a cursing podcast. I should have asked you ahead, but
that's okay.
you do a lot. Like you're at when you're at the beginning of the workforce, no job is a fun job. There's just not. I
I
remember when I was
agree.
interning and I would meet with friends after work, and I'd be like, "What are you doing?" And everyone's like, "Oh, I'm working on the Captain Morgan account." It's like you're not like you're like compiling receipts for the person who is working the Captain Morgan account. Like, don't come on. So the
I,
truth is, in the beginning of your career, like no job is going to be fun because, and that's how it goes. Like
yeah,
the newest person in there, like just like when I was growing up playing hockey, like the freshmen are the ones who load the bags onto the bus. Like that's the rite of passage. So be careful. But there are also things that I'll tell you. Like my brother had a job early in college, and it was a really prestigious job, and he's like, "I'm not happy. I'm not happy," and we're like trying to. As we're giving him advice, like, what are you unhappy about? And the way he says his boss treats him, it's like, dude, nobody should talk to anybody like that. That sounds toxic, and there's a difference. So, be aware, be cautiously aware of those things. And, and then if you're looking to make a big change, I think if you're making a big jump, I don't think you should jump blind because some
yeah,
people get a rush out of doing that stuff. And
yeah,
I think that you could listen, if you jump it from a high dive on a cliff, like it's beautiful, you'll get a great video, but you could either land well or you could land on rocks. And the bigger the jump, the bigger the risk. So I think when you're looking to make any move, you want to be really methodical about it.
yeah.
And you want to be really diligent and you really want to be honest with yourself because when you make that move, there's no guarantee, but you want to have as much certainty as possible that it's the right move because making a move from there is going to be twice as hard.
I think it's really interesting how you're sharing that because it reminds me too of someone who, and like you said, your first job and some of the things you do, you're not going to love it, right? There's certain
No,
things I
no.
remember doing. I'm like, is this what I went to school for? Like, really?
Yeah,
But you
yeah.
got to start somewhere, and you got to learn operations, and you got to learn different things. All those are building blocks. And there was one time an executive shared with me that, you know, you're not ready really to move out of a job truthfully until you first get a job, you learn the job, and then you innovate in the job. And once you've innovated
Ooh, I
in the
like
job,
that.
like, isn't that a cool, like, I carry that with me a lot because, get it, learn it, innovate. And when I tell
Yeah.
young people that, like, they're like, well, I've done this for 4 months, I'm ready. I'm like, you might be, but
Mhm.
what did you do different, right? So I wanted to
Yeah.
share that out loud on this podcast because that innovate piece makes you think about, well, what are you leaving as your mark? Because if you just did what the last person did, who cares,
Yep. And
right?
then what are you going to a new company for? There was another piece of advice. It was like early in your career, you need to bite, you don't have a seat at the table yet. You have to
Right.
bite your tongue so much that it's bleeding. Because every exec at the table, they've all got scarred up tongues, and that's why they know what they're talking about.
That's
But
right.
sometimes I think early career folks, you can get borderline precocious.
Yeah,
And, you're smart, you're capable. Those are facts. Those are things you need to know every day when you wake up. But there are also things that you have to learn. And if you think that you don't, you're shooting yourself in the foot before you walk in the door.
absolutely. Absolutely.
There's a healthy
So
balance between the ambition and humility.
100%. Great. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's a lot about success. I also think it's also healthy to skin your knee, make some failures, and learn from it. Can you share maybe one of the tough lessons you learned in business and how that helped shape you?
Oh my God. I think unfortunately we learn more from failure than we do from
I do
gain.
too.
I think that's it. When I in that first sales role, I was making 300 dials a day. And at the end, I made, multiply that by 40 days and I made 40 sales. So how much I had to learn before I did anything. Or, I'll give you another example. When I was first learning to fire people, I fired
Mm,
a lot, hundreds of salespeople. And first sales classes come in. I'm so bug-eyed hopeful that I can make everybody sell. I can get everybody going. But the truth is, this wasn't the job for everybody. And in the beginning, I'm sure I let a lot of people, hey, this is going to work out. This is going to work out. And then when they leave, we're both sad because learning to say, hey, this is business. And I always would say to the salespeople, and I still do, If you've got what it takes, I'm going to be the first person to tell you. And if you do something well, I'm going to be the first person to tell you, and you should be really proud of yourself. And if you're not doing well, I'm going to be the first person to tell you, and I'm going to tell you what you need to do to fix it. And so with that, we're being fair. There's an accountability, but this is a business relationship.
Yeah.
And there's so many things that you learn from that. I remember in leadership learning, it's so much easier to loosen the reins with an employee than it is to tighten the reins. Even with sales, when you're talking to a prospect, if you give too much leeway, it's going to be very hard to get someone to take you seriously. You're better off starting a little tighter, and then you can, the easy part let in. Um, and that was from having people where, for example, they join the team. I think they're just going to do it, so we're all buddy buddy, and then they're not doing so well. And I say, hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z, but I'm a buddy telling you this. It's not You're not looking at me like a superior necessarily.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know if this was another question. I don't know if there's another question you were going to ask, but
No, no, go ahead.
um, I thought there was a really good way. I think it was Bill Burr who said this. Um, in stand-up comedy, it's a lot like sales where you're going up, you're shooting your shot, and they're either going to laugh or they're going to boo you off the stage. And whenever he would bomb a set, he was like, I can take this one of two ways. I can either say, I failed and this was it, or I can say, well, this is like another story in how I'm getting to where I need to go. Roll with it.
Yeah.
We're all failing left and right. Embrace it, learn from it.
Yeah.
Some things you fail, they are your fault. Some things they're not your fault. And if you don't grow from it, then you're doing yourself a disservice. Then you just failed. But um, I don't know. I'm a big believer in like in sales, objections aren't objections, they're opportunities. That's how you're learning about the client. That's how you know what they care about and they don't care about. So
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
think the same goes with failures in life, in work, and anything.
Yeah. Some great advice. Thank you so much for sharing that. I can't, wow, we're getting to the end here. I just can't believe
Oh
it because
boy.
I love talking to you all the time. So
I know,
this is
right,
fun
dude?
as well for both of us.
Yeah.
But maybe like one last thing to think about the audience and leave them with a bit of maybe idea or powerful advice. What would that be? What could you share with our listeners maybe about life or work or chasing your dreams or one little thing that maybe you want to leave them with today as they're reflecting on this podcast?
If you wanted to learn about chasing your dreams, listen to more Bruce Springsteen songs. That's what I would say. I mean, every single thing the guy writes is about like we're pulling out of here to win. Things are hard, but we're gonna make it. Like I swear to God, I walked down
I
the
love
aisle
it.
to Born to Run. And that was his story even about like they came out with an album, it didn't do well, and the record company said, "You've got one more shot to do this or you're done." And they just put in hours and hours and hours, and Bruce just had this, he just kept going. And I mean, out of the 10 songs or 8 songs in that album, like I think like 80% of them are like they're massive mega hits, and it's all about chasing your dream, believe in yourself. So that I got, I love Bruce Springsteen. But the best piece of advice that I ever got in my life was breathe.
Hmm,
That's it.
I love
Breathe.
it. I think that's a
Forget to
great
breathe sometimes. Yeah.
great way to end the show. Breathe.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Max,
Yep.
thank you so much for taking the time and being on the show with me today. I was super pumped to do this with you, and it never disappoints to talk to you.
Brian,
Thanks
I
so
was
much.
flattered. I was flattered when you asked me. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
It's amazing. So, for our listeners, thanks again. So, for our listeners, if this inspired you, share it with a friend. Follow us on coffeewithconvery.com and also on Instagram, where we share upcoming clips and stories of what's happening with our guests. Remember, this is Coffee with Convery, where we show that success isn't always about climbing the corporate ladder. Sometimes it's about building your own jungle gym.